Have you ever been so hurt by your own family that you made a decision that would change everything forever? I'm talking about the kind of betrayal that cuts so deep, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and what family really means. Well, that's exactly what happened to me 3 months ago at my son's wedding. What started as what should have been the happiest day of our lives turned into the day I realized I was nothing more than a stranger in my own family's eyes. But here's the thing. Sometimes, the most painful moments reveal the most beautiful truths about who really cares about you. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people you least expect become the family you actually deserve. My name is Eleanor. I'm 68 years old, and I've been a widow for 7 years. I raised my son Michael as a single mother after my husband passed away when Michael was just 15. I worked 2 jobs, sacrificed everything I had, and put every penny I could scrape together toward Michael's education and future. I thought I was building a relationship with my son that would last forever. I was wrong. This is the story of how I was left out of my own son's wedding photo, how my neighbor became more of a family to me than my own blood, and how I made a decision that night that would shock everyone who thought they knew me. But most importantly, this is a story about discovering that sometimes the family we choose is worth more than the family we're born into. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand the full picture to appreciate just how deep this betrayal really went. My son Michael is 32 years old. He's a successful software engineer, makes good money, owns a beautiful house in the suburbs, and drives a car that costs more than I made in 2 years when I was working those double shifts to put him through college. Michael met his now wife Amanda 4 years ago through a dating app. From the very first time he brought her home to meet me, I could sense something was off. Not that she was a bad person, mind you. She was polite enough, always said the right things, brought flowers when she visited. But there was something in her eyes when she looked at me, something calculating and cold that made me feel like I was being measured and found wanting. Amanda comes from what you might call old money. Her family has been wealthy for generations. Her father owns a chain of luxury car dealerships. Her mother is involved in all sorts of charity organizations, the kind where you pay $5,000 a plate just to attend their galas. Amanda herself works in marketing for a high-end cosmetics company. But let's be honest, she doesn't need to work. She does it more for the social status than the paycheck. From early on, I noticed how Amanda would subtly steer conversations away from my background, my work history, my life before Michael became successful. If I mentioned my years working at the diner, she'd quickly change the subject. If I talked about the little apartment Michael and I shared when he was growing up, she'd get this uncomfortable look on her face like I was sharing something embarrassing. But Michael didn't seem to notice, or maybe he chose not to notice. Love can blind you to a lot of things, and I truly believe he loves Amanda. The problem is, I think he loves the idea of being accepted into her world even more. Over the 4 years they dated, I watched my son slowly change. He started speaking differently, dressing differently. Even the way he carried himself changed. He began talking about investments and networking opportunities and building generational wealth. These weren't bad things, but they weren't Michael either. At least, they weren't the Michael I had raised. The worst part was watching him become ashamed of where he came from. He stopped inviting me to events where Amanda's family would be present. When I asked about it, he'd make excuses. "It's just a work thing, Mom," or "You wouldn't be interested in this crowd." But I knew what was really happening. I was being slowly edited out of his life because I didn't fit the image he was trying to project. I live in a small house about 20 minutes from Michael's neighborhood. It's nothing fancy, a 2-bedroom ranch that I bought with my life insurance money after my husband died. But it's mine, it's paid off, and it's filled with memories of raising Michael. The walls are covered with pictures of his childhood, his graduations, his achievements. Every corner of that house tells the story of our life together. Next door to me lives a woman named Rose. She's 73, also a widow, and she's been my neighbor for 12 years. Rose is one of those people who just radiates warmth and kindness. She's the type of woman who shows up at your door with a casserole when you're sick, who remembers your birthday every year, who stops by just to chat when she notices you haven't been outside in a few days. Rose never had children of her own. She and her late husband tried for years, but it just wasn't meant to be. Instead, she poured all that maternal love into being the best neighbor, friend, and honorary grandmother to every kid in the neighborhood. She's been like a second mother to Michael over the years, always asking about him, always interested in his life and achievements. Here's something that might surprise you. Rose isn't struggling financially. Her late husband was a successful accountant, and she's actually quite comfortable. But you'd never know it from talking to her. She's humble, down to earth, and she treats everyone with the same kindness, regardless of their bank account or social status. Over the years, as Michael became more distant, Rose became more present in my life. She'd invite me over for coffee, we'd watch old movies together, she'd help me with projects around the house. She became the family I could count on when my actual family started treating me like an obligation rather than a loved one. Michael proposed to Amanda on a trip to Paris last October. He called me from the airport when they got back, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. I was genuinely happy for him. Despite my reservations about Amanda, I wanted my son to be happy, and if she made him happy, then I was willing to work harder at building a relationship with her. The proposal story was something straight out of a fairy tale. Michael had arranged for a private dinner at the Eiffel Tower, complete with a violinist and a custom-made ring that cost more than my car. Amanda posted about it on all her social media accounts, and the photos were beautiful. Michael in a designer suit, Amanda in a flowing dress, both of them glowing with happiness against the Paris skyline. When they got back, they immediately started planning the wedding. And let me tell you, this wasn't going to be any ordinary wedding. Amanda's family was planning what could only be described as a production. They booked a venue that normally hosts corporate events and celebrity parties. They hired a wedding planner who had coordinated weddings for professional athletes and movie stars. The budget was in the six-figure range, and that was just for the ceremony and reception. I offered to help with the costs. I may not have had much, but I had some savings put away, and I wanted to contribute to my son's special day. Michael politely declined, saying Amanda's family had it covered. I offered to help with the planning, to address invitations, to coordinate with vendors, anything to feel included in this major milestone in my son's life. Again, I was told it wasn't necessary. The wedding planning process became a series of events that I was either not invited to or invited to as an afterthought. There was the engagement party at Amanda's parents' country club. I found out about it 3 days before when Michael mentioned it in passing. There was the dress shopping expedition with Amanda's mother, sisters, and bridesmaids. I wasn't included. There was the couple's shower thrown by Amanda's college friends. I wasn't invited to that either. Each time I asked Michael about these events, he had an excuse ready. It was just a small thing, Mom. You wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway. We didn't want to overwhelm you with all the planning details. But I could see what was really happening. I was being systematically excluded from my own son's wedding preparations. The guest list was another source of tension. Amanda's family had invited over 200 people, extended family, college friends, business associates, country club members. My side of the family was represented by exactly 7 people. Myself, my brother and his wife, my late husband's sister and her husband, and 2 of Michael's cousins. When I asked Michael about inviting some of my friends, including Rose, he hesitated. "We're trying to keep it to family only on your side, Mom," he said. "We just don't have room for everyone." But apparently they had room for Amanda's parents' golf buddies and her sorority sisters from college. The hypocrisy was stunning, but every time I tried to address it, Michael would get defensive and accuse me of trying to make his wedding about me. The rehearsal dinner was held at an exclusive restaurant downtown. I arrived wearing my best dress, a navy blue outfit I had bought specifically for the occasion. It wasn't designer, but it was elegant and appropriate. As soon as I walked in, I felt the eyes of Amanda's family scanning me from head to toe. I could practically hear them categorizing me as the mother from the wrong side of the tracks. During the dinner, I sat at a table with my brother and his wife, while Michael and Amanda sat at the head table with Amanda's parents and the wedding party. I watched as Amanda's mother gave a speech about welcoming Michael into their family, and how excited they were to have such a wonderful addition to their clan. Not once did she mention me or acknowledge the woman who had raised this wonderful addition they were so thrilled to claim. When it came time for me to give my speech, I had prepared something heartfelt about watching Michael grow up, about the sacrifices we had made together, about how proud I was of the man he had become. But as I stood up to speak, I noticed Amanda whispering something to her mother, who then whispered to the wedding planner. Suddenly, the wedding planner was at my side, gently but firmly guiding me back to my seat, explaining that they needed to keep things moving and that speeches from parents would be saved for the reception the next day. I felt humiliated, but I sat down and kept quiet. I didn't want to make a scene at my son's rehearsal dinner. I told myself that tomorrow would be different, that the wedding day itself would be about family and love and celebration, not about social status and appearances. I couldn't have been more wrong. The morning of the wedding, I woke up early and spent extra time getting ready. I had bought a new dress for the occasion, a beautiful lavender outfit that was elegant but not flashy. I had my hair done at a salon, something I rarely splurged on, but I wanted to look my best for my son's big day. I even bought new shoes, despite the fact that they cost more than I usually spent on clothes in 3 months. When I arrived at the venue, I was struck by how gorgeous everything looked. The ceremony was being held in a beautiful garden with white roses and baby's breath decorating every surface. There were probably 300 guests in attendance, and everyone was dressed to the nines. I felt proud that my son was having such a beautiful wedding, even if I couldn't help but think about how different it was from the simple ceremony I had imagined when he was younger. The ceremony itself was lovely. Michael looked handsome in his tuxedo, and Amanda was absolutely stunning in her designer gown. When they exchanged vows, I couldn't help but tear up. Despite everything that had happened during the planning process, this was still my little boy getting married, and I was overwhelmed with emotion. But even during the ceremony, I noticed things that hurt. I was seated in the 3rd row, behind Amanda's extended family and family friends. The mothers of the bride and groom traditionally sit in the front row, but Amanda's mother sat there alone, while I was relegated to a spot where I could barely see over the elaborate floral arrangements. When the minister asked, "Who gives this woman to be married?" Amanda's father stood up proudly and walked her down the aisle. But when it came time for the traditional, "Who gives this man to be married?" there was no acknowledgement of me at all. Michael walked down the aisle alone, as if he had raised himself, as if he had appeared in the world fully formed without any help from the woman who had sacrificed everything to make his success possible. After the ceremony, there was a cocktail hour while the wedding party took photos. I mingled with the other guests, most of whom I didn't know. I tried to make conversation with some of Amanda's family members, but they were polite in that cold, distant way that makes you feel like you're bothering them just by existing. When the cocktail hour ended, we were all invited into the reception hall. The room was absolutely breathtaking, crystal chandeliers, gold accents everywhere, centerpieces that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I was seated at a table toward the back of the room with my brother and his wife and a few other distant relatives. The head table, where Michael and Amanda sat with their wedding party, felt like it was in a completely different world. The reception started with the traditional dances. Michael and Amanda had their first dance to some romantic song I didn't recognize. Then Amanda danced with her father, and it was beautiful. He spun her around the dance floor like she was still his little girl. The photographer captured every moment, every smile, every tear of joy. Then came the moment I had been looking forward to all day, the mother-son dance. This was supposed to be my special moment with Michael, the dance I had been dreaming about since he was a little boy. I had even picked out the song, "You'll Be in My Heart," by Phil Collins, the same song I used to sing to him when he was scared at night after his father died. But as I started to stand up from my table, ready to walk onto the dance floor, I watched in horror as Michael extended his hand to Amanda's mother instead. She stood up with a surprised but pleased smile, and they began to dance while the DJ announced the groom's dance with his new mother-in-law. I felt like I had been slapped across the face. I sat back down, trying to process what had just happened. My brother's wife leaned over and whispered, "I'm sure it's just a mistake, Eleanor. Maybe they'll call you next." But deep down, I knew it wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. This was Michael's way of showing everyone where his loyalties now lay. The dance ended and the reception continued. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I stood in the mirror and tried to compose myself. I was not going to cry at my son's wedding. I was not going to make a scene. I was going to get through this day with my dignity intact, no matter how much it hurt. When I returned to the reception, dinner was being served. The food was exquisite, probably the most expensive meal I had ever eaten, but I could barely taste it. All I could think about was how completely excluded I felt from my own son's wedding. I watched as Amanda's parents gave speeches about their daughter, about how proud they were of her, about how they were gaining a son in Michael. When it came time for the parents of the groom to speak, the wedding planner announced that they were skipping ahead in the program to keep things moving. I want to take a moment here to remind you to subscribe to this channel if you're enjoying this story. Your support means the world to me, and I have so many more stories to share with you about family, betrayal, and the incredible power of chosen family. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our content. After dinner, there was more dancing and celebration. I watched from my table as Michael and Amanda mingled with their guests, posing for photos with Amanda's family and friends. I kept waiting for someone to come get me for family photos, but the invitation never came. The photographer was capturing every moment of this elaborate celebration, but somehow I wasn't important enough to be included in any of those memories. As the evening wore on, I noticed that several of the other guests were starting to leave. The older relatives were heading home, some of the out-of-town guests were returning to their hotels. I decided that maybe it was time for me to leave too. I had fulfilled my obligation as the mother of the groom. I had been present for my son's wedding, even if I hadn't really been included in it. I was gathering my purse and saying goodbye to my brother when I heard the photographer calling out instructions for the final formal photos. "All right, everyone, we're going to do the big family photo now. All family members, please gather around the bride and groom." This was it. This was my moment to finally be included in something, to be part of the official record of my son's wedding day. I stood up and started walking toward the front of the room, where Michael and Amanda were positioned in front of a beautiful floral backdrop. But as I approached the group, Amanda's mother stepped forward and began directing the photo arrangement. "Okay, let's have all the immediate family here in the front," she said, gesturing to herself, her husband, Amanda's siblings, and their spouses. "Extended family can fill in behind us." I stood there waiting for someone to acknowledge me, to tell me where to stand, to include me in the immediate family group. After all, I was the mother of the groom. Doesn't that qualify as immediate family? But no one looked at me. No one called me forward. Michael was standing there smiling at the photographer, but he wasn't looking in my direction. Amanda's mother continued arranging people, pulling forward cousins and family friends, positioning everyone just so. The photographer was getting impatient, trying to get everyone to look at the camera and smile. And I was standing there, just outside the frame, watching it all happen. Finally, I cleared my throat and stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Where should I stand?" Amanda's mother looked at me with this confused expression, as if she had genuinely forgotten I existed. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Eleanor, right? Well, we're just doing immediate family right now. Maybe you could step back a little bit so we can get everyone in the frame?" I felt my face burn with embarrassment. "I am immediate family," I said, louder this time. "I'm Michael's mother." There was an awkward silence. Some of the other family members were looking at me with pity, others with annoyance that I was holding up the photo. Amanda's mother smiled that condescending smile again. "Of course you are, dear. But with Michael joining our family now, we're considering everyone here to be his immediate family. There will be plenty of other opportunities for photos." I looked at Michael, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to insist that his mother be included in the family photo. But he just stood there, his arm around Amanda, looking uncomfortable but not saying a word. That's when I realized it. I wasn't just being excluded from the photo. I was being excluded from the family. In their minds, I was no longer Michael's mother. I was just some woman from his past who had served her purpose and was no longer needed. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. The photographer was still waiting, the family was still arranged in their perfect poses, and I was still standing outside the frame like an unwelcome intruder. Finally, I turned around and walked away. I went back to my table, gathered my things, and left the reception without saying goodbye to anyone. I couldn't trust myself to speak to Michael without completely breaking down, and I wasn't about to give Amanda's family the satisfaction of seeing me cry. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember much about it, except that I had to pull over twice because I was crying so hard I couldn't see the road. By the time I got home, it was almost 11 o'clock, and I was emotionally exhausted. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time, just staring at my little house and wondering how I had gotten to this point in my life. When I finally went inside, I poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely do, and sat down in my living room, surrounded by all those photos of Michael growing up. I looked at pictures of him as a baby, as a toddler learning to walk, as a little boy on his first day of school. I looked at photos of us together, mother and son, a team against the world. And I cried harder than I had cried since my husband died. That's when I heard a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and it was getting late. For a moment I thought maybe it was Michael. Maybe he had realized how badly he had treated me and had come to apologize. But when I opened the door, it was Rose, my neighbor. "Eleanor," she said, looking at me with such concern. "Honey, are you okay? I saw you come home and you looked so upset." I couldn't even speak. I just started crying again, and Rose immediately stepped inside and wrapped me in the biggest, warmest hug. She held me while I sobbed, not asking any questions, just letting me get it all out. When I finally calmed down enough to talk, I told her everything. I told her about being excluded from the wedding planning, about being seated in the back during the ceremony, about being skipped over for the mother-son dance, and finally about being left out of the family photo. Rose listened to every word, her face growing more and more angry on my behalf. "Eleanor," she said when I finished, "that is absolutely unacceptable. You are that boy's mother. You raised him, you sacrificed for him, you loved him unconditionally. How dare they treat you like you don't matter?" "But maybe they're right," I said through my tears. "Maybe I don't fit into his new life. Maybe I'm just holding him back from becoming the person he wants to be." Rose grabbed my hands and looked me straight in the eye. "Don't you dare say that. You are an incredible woman, Eleanor. You raised an intelligent, successful son all by yourself. You worked 2 jobs to put him through college. You gave him every advantage you could possibly give him. If he's too blind to see what an amazing mother he has, then that's his loss, not yours." We talked for hours that night. Rose told me stories about her own family, about the people who had disappointed her over the years, and the people who had surprised her with their kindness. She told me about her late husband, about how they had built a life together based on love and mutual respect, not on social status or appearances. "You know what I think?" she said as we sat there in my living room, finishing our second glass of wine. "I think some people get so caught up in trying to impress others that they forget to appreciate the people who have always been there for them. Michael is making a mistake, and someday he's going to realize it. The question is, will you still be there when he does?" That question hit me like a punch to the gut, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I would be there. I had spent 32 years putting Michael first, making sacrifices for him, being the constant, reliable presence in his life. And what had it gotten me? A seat in the back row and exclusion from the family photo. Rose must have seen something in my face because she squeezed my hand. "Eleanor, whatever you're thinking, don't make any decisions tonight. You're hurt and angry, and rightfully so, but don't do anything permanent while you're feeling this way. But I was already making decisions. As I sat there listening to Rose talk about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who value you, I was thinking about my will. I was thinking about the life insurance policy I had maintained for years, the one that would leave everything to Michael when I died. I was thinking about the house that was paid off, the savings account I had built up, the investments I had made. I was thinking about all the ways I had planned to take care of my son, even after I was gone. And I was thinking about how none of that mattered to him anymore. He had made it clear that I was no longer part of his family. So why should he benefit from my death when he couldn't even be bothered to include me in his life? As Rose was getting ready to leave, she turned to me and said something that would change everything. "Eleanor, I want you to know that you are family to me. Blood doesn't make family, love does, choice does, and I choose you. I will always choose you." After she left, I sat alone in my living room thinking about what she had said. Family isn't about blood, it's about choice. And while Michael had chosen to exclude me from his new family, Rose had chosen to include me in hers. The woman who had no biological connection to me had shown me more love and acceptance in one evening than my own son had shown me in years. I went to bed that night with a decision made. I was going to rewrite my will. The next morning, I called my lawyer and made an appointment for the following week. I told him I needed to make some changes to my estate planning, and he scheduled me for Thursday afternoon. I didn't tell him what changes I was planning to make. I wanted to think about it more first, to make sure I was doing the right thing. Over the next few days, I kept expecting Michael to call. I thought surely he would reach out to thank me for coming to the wedding, or to apologize for how I had been treated, or at least to ask if I had gotten home safely. But my phone remained silent. I did get a text message from him on Tuesday. It was a group text that had been sent to what looked like about 50 people, and it just said, "Amanda and I are back from our honeymoon. Thanks to everyone who made our wedding day so special. Love you all." There was a photo attached of them on some tropical beach, both of them looking tan and happy. I wasn't even sure if he had intended to include me in the group text, or if my number had just been automatically included because I was in his contacts. I stared at that text for a long time, waiting to feel something: hurt, anger, disappointment. But mostly I just felt empty. This was my son, the child I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I was now just another name on his mass text list. Meanwhile, Rose was checking on me every day. She brought me meals, invited me over for coffee, made sure I was getting out of the house and not wallowing in self-pity. She listened when I needed to talk, and she gave me space when I needed to think. She was, in every way that mattered, acting like family. On Thursday, I went to my lawyer's office. Mr. Peterson had been handling my legal affairs for about 10 years, ever since I had needed help with my husband's estate. He was a kind man in his 60s, the type of lawyer who actually cared about his clients rather than just billing them for his time. "So, Eleanor," he said, settling into his chair across from his desk, "what changes are we looking at today?" I took a deep breath. I want to change my will. I want to remove my son as the primary beneficiary and leave everything to my neighbor Rose instead. Mr. Peterson's eyebrows shot up. That's quite a significant change, Eleanor. Can I ask what's prompted this decision?" I told him about the wedding, about the years of gradual exclusion, about how I had been treated like an outsider in my own son's life. I told him about Rose, about how she had shown me more kindness and acceptance than my own family had. I explained that I wanted my assets to go to someone who actually valued me as a person. "I understand you're hurt," Mr. Peterson said gently, "and I'm not saying your feelings aren't valid, but this is a big decision and it's permanent. Are you sure you want to completely disinherit your son?" "I'm not disinheriting him," I said. "I'm choosing to leave my assets to the person who treats me like family. Michael has made it clear that he doesn't need me in his life, and he certainly doesn't need my money. His wife's family has more wealth than I could ever dream of. But Rose has been there for me. She's the one who deserves to benefit from my estate. We spent the next hour going through the details of the new will. I left Rose the house, the savings account, the life insurance policy, and all my personal possessions. I also wrote a letter to be read after my death, explaining my decision. I wanted Michael to understand that this wasn't about revenge, it was about recognition. I was recognizing who had truly been family to me. Mr. Peterson had me review everything twice, and he made me promise to think about it for another week before we made it official. I just want you to be absolutely certain about this, Eleanor. Once we file this new will, there's no going back. I agreed to wait one more week, but I knew I wasn't going to change my mind. The decision felt right in a way that few decisions in my life had felt right. I was finally taking control of my own story instead of letting other people write it for me. That weekend, Rose invited me over for dinner. She had made a roast with all the fixings, and we sat at her kitchen table eating and talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her plans to volunteer at the local animal shelter, and I told her about a book I was reading. It was such a normal, comfortable conversation, the kind I used to have with Michael before he got so caught up in his new life. As we were cleaning up the dishes, Rose said something that surprised me. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about what happened at the wedding, and I've decided I want to do something about it." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, I want to give a speech. At the community center next month, they're having their annual volunteer appreciation dinner. I've been volunteering there for 15 years, and they asked me to speak about community and what it means to me. I want to talk about you." I was taken aback. "Rose, you don't need to do that. I don't want you to make a big fuss about this." "It's not a fuss," she said firmly. "It's recognition. It's about acknowledging someone who has been an incredible neighbor, friend, and honorary family member. It's about showing people what real family looks like." I tried to talk her out of it, but Rose can be very stubborn when she sets her mind to something. She insisted that she wanted to honor me publicly, the way I should have been honored at my own son's wedding. The following Thursday, I went back to Mr. Peterson's office and signed the new will. As I put my pen to paper, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. The community center dinner was scheduled for the following Saturday. Rose had asked me to be her guest, and I had agreed, though I was nervous about being the subject of a public speech. The community center was a place I had volunteered at occasionally over the years, but I wasn't as involved as Rose was. If you're enjoying this story, I want to encourage you to subscribe to this channel. These stories about family dynamics, betrayal, and the power of chosen family really resonate with people, and I'd love to have you as part of our community. Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments about your own experiences with family, both the family you were born into and the family you've chosen. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully in a nice pantsuit and met Rose at the community center. The event was bigger than I had expected. There were probably about 200 people there, all volunteers and donors who supported the center's work. We sat at a table with some of Rose's other volunteer friends, and I found myself actually enjoying the evening. The dinner was delicious, and the conversation was lively. These were people who genuinely cared about their community, who gave their time and energy to help others. It was such a different atmosphere from the wedding, where everything had been about status and appearances. After dinner, there were several speeches recognizing different volunteers and donors. Rose was introduced as someone who had been the heart and soul of the center's senior programs for over a decade. As she walked up to the podium, I felt nervous for her, but also incredibly proud. "Good evening, everyone," Rose began, her voice clear and strong. "I want to start by saying how honored I am to be here tonight, surrounded by so many people who have dedicated themselves to making our community a better place. When they asked me to speak about what community means to me, I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about family." She paused and looked directly at me. "You see, family isn't always about blood. Sometimes the most important family members are the ones we choose. Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who aren't obligated to love us, but who choose to anyway." Rose went on to tell the story of our friendship, about how we had become neighbors and then friends and finally family. She talked about the importance of recognizing and appreciating the people who show up for us, who support us, who make our lives better just by being in them. "I want to tell you about my friend Eleanor," she said, and I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and pride. "Eleanor is one of the most incredible women I know. She raised her son as a single mother, working 2 jobs to put him through college. She has been a devoted daughter, a loyal friend, and a generous neighbor. She has given so much of herself to others, often without any recognition or thanks." Rose paused, and I could see tears in her eyes. Recently, Eleanor was treated badly by people who should have treasured her. She was excluded and dismissed by people who should have been celebrating her. But here's what I want everyone to understand. Their failure to recognize Eleanor's worth doesn't diminish her value. It just reveals their own blindness. The room was completely silent. I looked around and saw people nodding, some wiping away tears. Rose continued, "Eleanor, I want you to know that you are seen, you are valued, and you are loved. You are my chosen family, and I am honored to call you my friend." She turned back to the audience. "That's what community means to me. It's about recognizing the extraordinary people who might otherwise go unnoticed. It's about creating family bonds that are based on love and respect, not on obligation or convenience. It's about choosing to see the best in people and making sure they know how much they matter." Rose finished her speech to thunderous applause. As she walked back to our table, I stood up and hugged her, tears streaming down my face. I had never felt so honored, so recognized, so loved. In that moment, I knew without a doubt that I had made the right decision about my will. After the dinner, several people came up to me to introduce themselves and to tell me how moved they had been by Rose's speech. These strangers were treating me with more warmth and respect than I had received from my own family in years. It was both heartbreaking and healing at the same time. As Rose and I walked home that night, she linked her arm through mine. "Thank you for letting me do that," she said. "I know it was probably embarrassing, but I needed people to know what an amazing woman you are." "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "I've never felt so seen before." "Well, you better get used to it," Rose said with a laugh. "Because I plan to keep telling people how wonderful you are, for as long as we both shall live." That night, I went to bed feeling something I hadn't felt in years, truly appreciated. For the first time since the wedding, I wasn't thinking about Michael or Amanda, or how they had treated me. I was thinking about Rose, about the community center, about the people who had welcomed me with open arms, despite being strangers just hours before. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. The very next morning, I woke up to find 17 missed calls on my phone, all from Michael. My heart immediately started racing. Had something happened? Was there an emergency? I called him back, and he answered on the first ring. "Mom, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all night. We need to talk." "What's wrong?" I asked, still thinking there might be some kind of family emergency. "I heard about what happened at the community center last night," he said, and his voice was tight with anger. "Amanda's cousin was there, and she called Amanda this morning to tell her about some speech where you were basically telling everyone how badly we treated you at the wedding." My stomach dropped. I hadn't thought about the possibility that someone from Amanda's family might be at the dinner. "Michael, that's not what happened. Rose gave a speech about community and friendship, and she mentioned me because you told her we excluded you from the wedding," he interrupted. "Mom, do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? Amanda is devastated. Her family is furious. They're saying you're trying to make us look bad in the community." I felt that familiar anger rising in my chest. "Michael, I didn't tell Rose to give that speech. She did it because she cares about me. And I didn't tell her to say anything bad about you. She was talking about the importance of chosen family and recognizing people who matter to you." "Well, that's not how it came across," he said. "Amanda's cousin said it was obvious you were talking about us, about how we didn't appreciate you. She said you were crying and that everyone was looking at our family like we were terrible people. Maybe that's because you were terrible to me, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. Maybe if you had treated me with basic respect at your wedding, there wouldn't be anything for people to misinterpret. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Michael finally spoke, his voice was cold. I can't believe you're saying this. We invited you to our wedding. We included you in everything. You seated me in the third row like I was a distant acquaintance. You didn't let me give a speech at the rehearsal dinner. You danced with Amanda's mother instead of me. And you left me out of the family photo, Michael. Your own mother wasn't important enough to be in the official family photo. That wasn't intentional, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Things were just hectic, and Amanda's mom was handling the photo arrangements. It wasn't personal. It was absolutely personal, I said, my voice getting louder. Everything about that wedding was designed to show me that I don't belong in your new life. And you know what? Message received. I got it loud and clear. Mom, you're being dramatic. You're taking everything personally when it's not about you. The wedding was about Amanda and me, not about you. That sentence hit me like a physical blow. Not about me? Michael, I'm your mother. I'm the woman who raised you, who sacrificed everything for you, who worked 2 jobs so you could have a better life. How is your wedding not about me at all? Because it's about our future, not about the past, he said, and I could hear Amanda's voice in the background, whispering something to him. Look, Mom, I think you need to get some perspective here. You're making this whole thing about you when it should be about supporting us as we start our new life together. Supporting you? I laughed bitterly. Michael, when have you ever asked for my support? When have you ever included me in your life enough for me to be able to support you? You've made it clear that you don't need me, that you don't want me around unless it's absolutely necessary. That's not true, he said, but again his voice lacked conviction. We're just busy, Mom. We're building a life together. We can't be expected to include you in every single thing we do. I'm not asking to be included in everything, I said, my voice breaking. I'm asking to be included in something. I'm asking to be treated like I matter to you, like I'm more than just an obligation you have to fulfill. I heard Amanda's voice more clearly now, and she sounded upset. Michael covered the phone for a moment, and I could hear them having a muffled conversation. When he came back on the line, his tone was different, more formal, more distant. Mom, Amanda and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if we take a break from each other for a while. Just until you can work through whatever issues you're having and stop trying to make our marriage about you. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean, take a break? I mean, we need some space. We need time to start our marriage without having to constantly deal with drama and accusations. We need you to respect our boundaries and stop trying to interfere in our relationship. Interfere? I was incredulous. Michael, I haven't interfered in anything. I've barely been included in anything to interfere with. I went to your wedding. I sat where I was told to sit. I didn't make a scene when I was excluded from the family photo. How is that interfering? You're talking to the neighbors about our private family business, he said. You're making us look bad in the community. That's not okay, Mom. I didn't talk to anyone about anything, I said, my voice rising again. Rose is my friend, and she gave a speech about friendship and community. If you and Amanda are embarrassed by that, maybe you should think about why. We're not embarrassed, he said quickly. We're trying to build a life here, and we can't do that if you're going to be talking about us behind our backs. Behind your backs? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Michael, you're my son. I love you. I would never deliberately try to hurt you or your reputation. But I also won't pretend that I wasn't hurt by how I was treated at your wedding. There was another long pause, and I could hear Amanda talking urgently in the background. When Michael came back on the line, his voice was final. Mom, I'm sorry you feel like we hurt you. That wasn't our intention. But we need some time and space to figure out how to move forward. I'll call you in a few weeks, okay? Michael, please don't do this, I said, but I could hear the phone line going dead. He had hung up on me. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. My son had essentially just told me that I was being cut out of his life because I had been publicly embarrassed by a speech that was meant to honor me. The irony was almost too much to bear. I called Rose immediately and told her what had happened. She was furious. "Eleanor, this is absolutely ridiculous. You did nothing wrong. Nothing." That speech was about friendship and community, and if Michael and his wife are so insecure that they can't handle someone saying nice things about you, then that's their problem, not yours. "But maybe I should have stopped you," I said, second-guessing myself. "Maybe I should have known that someone from Amanda's family might be there." "Eleanor, stop," Rose said firmly. "You cannot live your life walking on eggshells, worried about what Amanda's family might think or how they might react. You deserve to be celebrated. You deserve to have friends who appreciate you. And you deserve to have a son who supports you instead of cutting you off because his wife is embarrassed." Rose was right, but that didn't make it hurt any less. The next few weeks were some of the darkest of my life. I kept expecting Michael to call, to apologize, to realize how badly he had overreacted. But my phone remained silent. I would check it obsessively, hoping to see his name on the screen. But there was nothing. Meanwhile, Rose was a constant presence in my life. She brought me meals when I was too depressed to cook. She sat with me when I cried. She listened when I needed to talk through my feelings. She was, in every way that mattered, acting like the family I had lost. About a month after the phone call with Michael, I received a package in the mail. It was from a professional photography studio, and inside was a single photo, the formal family photo from Michael's wedding. In the picture, Michael and Amanda were surrounded by Amanda's entire extended family, all of them smiling and beautiful and perfect. I stared at that photo for a long time, looking for myself in it, even though I knew I wouldn't find myself there. There was a note attached to the photo, written in Amanda's handwriting. "Eleanor, we thought you might want a copy of our family photo. We hope you're doing well. Love, Michael and Amanda." I don't know if they intended it as a kindness or as a reminder of my exclusion, but seeing that photo, seeing my son surrounded by his new family while I was completely absent, was like being punched in the gut all over again. That night, I called Mr. Peterson and asked him to send me a copy of my new will. I wanted to read it again, to make sure I was still comfortable with the decisions I had made. As I read through the document, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't expected. I had left everything to Rose, not out of spite, but out of love. I was leaving my assets to the person who had truly been family to me. The will also included a letter to be read after my death. In it, I explained my decision to Michael, not with anger, but with sadness. I told him that I hoped he would understand that I had chosen to leave my estate to the person who had valued me most during my final years. I told him that I loved him, that I would always love him, but that I couldn't pretend that our relationship had been what I had hoped it would be. 2 months passed without any contact from Michael. I celebrated my 69th birthday with Rose, who threw me a small party with some of our mutual friends from the community center. It was a lovely evening, filled with laughter and warmth and the kind of genuine affection that I had been missing from my life. As I blew out the candles on my cake, I made a wish. I wished for peace. I wished for the strength to build a life that wasn't centered around waiting for my son to remember that I existed. I wished for the courage to embrace the family I had chosen, rather than mourning the family that had chosen to exclude me. A few days after my birthday, I got a call from Michael. I almost didn't answer. I had trained myself not to jump every time the phone rang, hoping it might be him. But something made me pick up. "Mom?" His voice sounded different, smaller somehow. I wanted to call and wish you a happy birthday. I know it was a few days ago, but I wanted to talk to you." "Thank you," I said, my voice carefully neutral. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. "I heard about your birthday party at the community center," he said. "Amanda's cousin mentioned it. She said it looked like you had a really nice time." "I did," I said. "Rose and our friends made it very special." There was a long pause. Mom, I've been thinking about our last conversation, about everything that happened at the wedding. I think maybe we both said some things we didn't mean. I meant everything I said, Michael, I replied. I was hurt by how I was treated at your wedding, and I was disappointed by how you handled it when I tried to talk to you about it. I know, he said quietly. I know you were hurt, and I'm sorry about that. I really am. But you have to understand how difficult this has been for Amanda and me. Her family has been asking questions, making comments about our relationship with you. It's been really stressful. So you decided to cut me out of your life rather than deal with the stress, I said. That's what you're telling me. No, that's not what I'm saying, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm saying that we're trying to figure out how to balance everything, how to be married and still maintain our relationships with our families. Michael, I'm not our families. I'm your mother. I'm the woman who raised you. I should be a priority, not a problem to be managed. There was another long pause. You're right, he said finally. You're absolutely right. I've been treating you like a problem, and that's not fair. I've been so focused on fitting into Amanda's world that I forgot about the woman who made it possible for me to have any world at all. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. This was what I had been waiting to hear for months. Michael, I want to try again, Mom, he said. I want to find a way to include you in our lives. I want to be the son you deserve, not the son who's embarrassed by where he came from. I don't want you to be embarrassed by where you came from, I said. I want you to be proud of it. I want you to remember that the struggles we went through together made you who you are. I want you to value the sacrifices that were made for you. I do value them, he said. I do. I got caught up in trying to impress Amanda's family, and I lost sight of what really mattered. We talked for over an hour that night. Michael told me about the pressure he had been feeling to fit into Amanda's social circle, about how he had been struggling with feeling like he didn't belong. He told me about fights he and Amanda had been having about money and social obligations and family expectations. I listened, and I felt my heart softening toward him. He was still my son, still the little boy I had raised, even if he had made some terrible choices. But I also knew that words were easy. Actions were what mattered. Michael, I said, as our conversation was winding down, I want to rebuild our relationship. I really do. But things are going to have to be different. I'm not going to accept being treated like a second-class citizen in your life. I'm not going to pretend that everything is okay when it's not. I understand, he said. I want things to be different too. Can we start with dinner next week? Just the three of us? I want to try to find a way for you and Amanda to build a better relationship. I agreed, though I was skeptical about Amanda's willingness to change. But I was willing to try, for Michael's sake, and for the sake of the relationship we had once had. The dinner was scheduled for the following Saturday at a restaurant downtown. I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that was nice but not trying too hard. I arrived a few minutes early and was surprised to find Michael already there, sitting at a table in the corner. Mom, he said, standing up to hug me. Thank you for coming. Amanda will be here in a few minutes. She's just running a little late. We sat down and ordered drinks, and Michael seemed nervous. He kept checking his phone and looking toward the entrance. She's really trying, Mom, he said. She wants to make things right between you two. Amanda arrived about 15 minutes later, looking polished and professional in a designer dress and heels. She kissed Michael hello and gave me a polite smile. Eleanor, thank you for agreeing to dinner. I know things have been tense between us. Thank you for coming, I said, trying to keep my voice warm, but not overly enthusiastic. The dinner started off awkwardly, with all of us trying too hard to be polite. Amanda asked about my house, my garden, my volunteer work at the community center. Michael talked about his job and their recent vacation to Napa Valley. I talked about a book I was reading and my plans to take a cooking class. But as the evening progressed, I began to notice something. While Michael seemed genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship, Amanda still seemed distant and calculating. She was saying all the right things, but her eyes were cold. She was performing the role of the apologetic daughter-in-law, but I could tell it was just a performance. About halfway through dinner, Amanda said something that confirmed my suspicions. "Eleanor, I want to apologize for how you were treated at our wedding. I know you felt excluded, and that wasn't our intention." "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that." "I think there were just some miscommunications," she continued, "and some people who maybe didn't understand the family dynamics. But I want you to know that we consider you family, and we want to do better going forward." The way she said it, "some people who maybe didn't understand the family dynamics," made it clear that she still thought I was the problem. She was apologizing for my feelings, not for her actions. Michael seemed to miss the subtle condescension in her tone, but I caught it loud and clear. This dinner wasn't about making amends. It was about managing me, about keeping me quiet and compliant so that Amanda's family wouldn't have to deal with any more embarrassing speeches about community and chosen family. When the check came, Michael insisted on paying. As we were getting ready to leave, Amanda turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Eleanor, I hope we can put all this behind us and move forward as a family." "I hope so too," I said, but I knew in my heart that nothing had really changed. Amanda was still the same person who had orchestrated my exclusion from the wedding. Michael was still the same person who had chosen his new family over his old one. They were just being more careful about how they managed me now. As I drove home that night, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I had given them a chance to make things right, and they had shown me exactly who they were. Michael's apology had been sincere, but it had also been incomplete. He was sorry that I had been hurt, but he wasn't willing to make the fundamental changes that would prevent it from happening again. Amanda was still the same person who saw me as an embarrassment, a problem to be managed rather than a person to be valued. And Michael was still choosing her comfort over my dignity. That night, I called Rose and told her about the dinner. She listened without judgment, letting me work through my feelings out loud. "I think I needed to try," I said. "I needed to know that I had given them every possible chance to make things right." "And now you know," Rose said gently. "Now you know that you've done everything you can do. The rest is up to them." "I don't think they're going to change," I said. "I think this is who they are now." "Then you need to decide who you're going to be," Rose said. "Are you going to keep waiting for them to become the people you wish they were? Or are you going to focus on building a life with the people who actually value you?" I already knew the answer to that question. I had known it for months, really, but hearing Rose say it out loud made it real. The next morning, I called Michael. "I wanted to thank you for dinner last night," I said. "And I wanted to tell you that I've made a decision." "What kind of decision?" he asked, and I could hear the wariness in his voice. "I've decided that I'm not going to keep trying to force a relationship that clearly isn't working," I said. "I'm not going to keep hoping that you'll suddenly remember how to value me, or that Amanda will suddenly decide I'm worth including in your lives." "Mom, that's not—" "We're trying to make things better," he said. "No, Michael, you're trying to manage me. You're trying to keep me quiet and compliant so that I won't cause any more embarrassment for Amanda's family. But I'm not going to be managed. I'm 69 years old, and I'm too old to pretend that being tolerated is the same as being loved." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "What are you saying, Mom?" "I'm saying that I'm done waiting for you to make me a priority. I'm done accepting scraps of attention and pretending they're enough. I'm done being grateful for basic courtesy from my own son." "So what? You're cutting me out of your life?" he asked, and he sounded genuinely shocked. "I'm not cutting you out," I said. "I'm stepping back. I'm focusing on the people who actually want me in their lives. If you ever decide that you want a real relationship with me, not one where I have to apologize for existing, not one where I have to pretend that being excluded from your wedding was no big deal, then you know where to find me." "Mom, please don't do this," he said, and for a moment he sounded like the little boy I had raised. "You're the only family I have left." "No, Michael," I said sadly. "I'm not. You made it very clear that Amanda's family is your family now. I'm just the woman who raised you, and apparently that's not enough to earn me a place in your life." We talked for a few more minutes, but I could tell that he still didn't understand. He was still thinking in terms of managing the situation, of finding a way to keep everyone happy without having to make any real changes. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and looked around at my little house. It was quiet and peaceful, filled with memories of a life well lived. I thought about all the years I had spent waiting for Michael to call, hoping for invitations that never came, accepting crumbs of attention, and pretending they were enough. I was done with that. I was done letting other people determine my worth. I was done waiting for permission to be happy. Over the next few months, I threw myself into building the life I actually wanted. I increased my volunteer work at the community center, becoming involved in their literacy program and their Meals on Wheels service. I took the cooking class I had mentioned at dinner, and I discovered that I actually had a talent for French cuisine. Rose and I became even closer, if that was possible. We took a trip to the mountains together, something I had wanted to do for years, but had never done because I was always saving money for Michael's future. We went to museums and concerts and farmers markets. We hosted dinner parties for our friends from the community center. I was happier than I had been in years. I was building meaningful relationships with people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. I was creating memories that were about joy and friendship and love, not about disappointment and exclusion. Michael called me occasionally, but our conversations were stilted and awkward. He would ask about my health, my house, my activities, but he never asked about my feelings or my life in any meaningful way. He was checking a box, fulfilling an obligation, but he wasn't actually connecting with me. About 6 months after our last dinner, I received an invitation in the mail. It was for Amanda's birthday party, being held at their country club. The invitation was formal and elegant, with gold embossing and expensive paper. At the bottom, in small print, it said, "Cocktail attire requested." I stared at that invitation for a long time, trying to decide how to respond. Part of me wanted to see it as an olive branch, a sign that maybe they were trying to include me in their social life. But another part of me recognized it for what it really was, another opportunity to be marginalized and excluded, this time in front of Amanda's entire social circle. I decided not to go. Instead, I wrote a polite note declining the invitation and sent it back with a nice gift, a beautiful scarf that I thought Amanda would like. I didn't explain why I wasn't coming, and I didn't make excuses. I just said that I wouldn't be able to attend, and I wished her a happy birthday. Michael called me the day after the party. "Mom, why didn't you come to Amanda's birthday party? We were expecting you." I sent a response declining the invitation, I said. I thought it was clear that I wouldn't be able to attend. "But why?" he asked. "It would have been a good opportunity for you to meet more of our friends, to be part of our social circle." I almost laughed. "Michael, I'm 69 years old. I don't need to meet your friends. I have my own friends. I have my own social circle. I have my own life." "I know that," he said. I thought you'd want to be included." "I want to be included in your life, Michael. But being invited to a party where I'll be ignored and marginalized isn't inclusion. It's just another opportunity for me to be reminded that I don't belong in your world." "That's not true," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You would have been welcomed." "Welcomed the same way I was welcomed at your wedding?" I asked. "Seated in the back, excluded from the important moments, treated like a distant acquaintance rather than family?" There was a long pause. "Mom, I thought we were past all that." "We're not past it, Michael. We're just not talking about it anymore." "There's a difference." That conversation marked another turning point in our relationship. Michael seemed to realize that I wasn't going to pretend anymore, that I wasn't going to accept being treated poorly just to maintain some semblance of a relationship. He started calling less frequently, and when he did call, our conversations became even more superficial. Around this time, I began to think more seriously about my mortality. I was approaching 70, and while I was healthy and active, I wasn't naive about the realities of aging. I wanted to make sure that my affairs were in order, that my wishes were clear, and that the people I loved would be taken care of after I was gone. I met with Mr. Peterson again to review my will and make sure everything was still exactly as I wanted it. I also decided to write additional letters, not just to Michael, but to Rose and to some of my other close friends. I wanted to make sure that everyone understood how much they had meant to me, how much joy they had brought into my life. The letter to Rose was easy to write. I told her about the difference she had made in my life, about how her friendship had sustained me through the darkest period I had experienced since my husband's death. I told her about the decision to leave her my estate, and I explained that it wasn't about money, it was about recognition. I was recognizing her as the family member she had always been to me. The letter to Michael was much harder to write. I wrote it and rewrote it dozens of times, trying to find the right tone, the right words to express everything I was feeling. I didn't want it to be angry or bitter, but I also didn't want it to be apologetic or weak. I wanted it to be honest. In the final version, I told Michael that I loved him, that I would always love him, but that I had been deeply hurt by his choices. I told him that I understood he had been trying to build a life with Amanda, but that I had hoped he would find a way to include me in that life rather than exclude me from it. I told him about the will, about my decision to leave everything to Rose. I explained that it wasn't about punishment, it was about recognition. I was leaving my estate to the person who had been family to me during my final years, the person who had valued me and supported me and loved me unconditionally. I told him that I hoped he would understand, and that I hoped he would find happiness with Amanda. I told him that I was proud of his success, even if I was disappointed in some of his choices. I told him that I had done my best as his mother, and that I hoped someday he would remember our relationship with more kindness than he had shown me in recent years. Writing that letter was one of the hardest things I had ever done, but it was also cathartic. It allowed me to say everything I had been holding inside, everything I had been afraid to say because I was worried about damaging our relationship further. But by the time I finished writing it, I realized that our relationship was already damaged beyond repair. Michael had made his choice, and I had made mine. We were two people who had once been inseparable, but who had grown apart in ways that couldn't be fixed with apologies or good intentions. I sealed the letter and put it with my other important documents. I hoped that Michael would never have to read it, that somehow we would find our way back to each other before it was too late. But I also knew that hope was probably unrealistic. As I approached my 70th birthday, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. I had started as a young widow, devastated by the loss of my husband, but determined to raise my son to be a good man. I had worked multiple jobs, sacrificed my own dreams and desires, and poured every ounce of my energy into giving Michael the best life I could provide. For many years, I had thought that sacrifice was worth it. I had been proud of Michael's success, proud of the man he had become, proud of the life he had built. But somewhere along the way, he had forgotten where he came from. He had forgotten the woman who had made his success possible. That forgetting had cost him something precious, the unconditional love and support of his mother. It had cost him the inheritance that I had spent decades building for him. It had cost him the relationship that had once been the most important thing in both of our lives. But it had also given me something valuable. It had forced me to build a life that didn't revolve around waiting for his approval or attention. It had led me to Rose, to the community center, to friendships and experiences that had enriched my life in ways I never could have imagined. I was no longer the woman who had sat in the back row at her son's wedding, accepting exclusion and marginalization as the price of being included at all. I was no longer the woman who had begged for scraps of attention and pretended they were enough. I was a woman who had chosen her own family, who had built her own life, who had found her own value and worth. I was a woman who had learned that love isn't about blood or obligation. It's about choice and commitment and daily acts of kindness. As I got ready for bed that night, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw someone I was proud of. I saw a woman who had survived loss and betrayal and disappointment, but who had come through it stronger and more self-aware. I saw a woman who had learned to value herself as much as she valued others. I saw a woman who had finally figured out what family really means. And for the first time in years, I was truly at peace with the decisions I had made. I was at peace with the will I had written, with the letters I had composed, with the life I had chosen to build. I was at peace with the knowledge that when my time came, I would be leaving my estate to the person who had truly been family to me. Not the person who was supposed to be family, but the person who had chosen to be family. That night, I went to sleep knowing that I had lived a life of meaning and purpose. I had raised a son, even if he had ultimately chosen to exclude me from his life. I had built meaningful relationships with people who valued me. I had contributed to my community and made a difference in the lives of others. And I had learned one of the most important lessons of my life, that sometimes the family we choose is worth more than the family we're born into. Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who have no obligation to love us, but who choose to anyway. If you've made it this far in my story, I want to encourage you to subscribe to this channel. Stories like mine are more common than you might think, and I hope that by sharing my experience, I can help others who are struggling with similar family dynamics. Family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about choice, commitment, and the daily decision to value and support each other. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for understanding that love isn't about obligation or duty. It's about recognition and appreciation and the willingness to show up for the people who matter to you. And thank you for reminding me that everyone deserves to be valued, everyone deserves to be included, and everyone deserves to be loved for who they are, not for what they can do for others. My name is Eleanor, and this is my story of how I learned that sometimes the most painful betrayals lead to the most beautiful discoveries about what family really means.